Greetings, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to PlayStation Fix, episode 40. I'm Kyle Prawl, your interim host, while our good friend Will Robinson recovers from the, well, I was about to say the hype of the day, but I don't know if that's a fair way of describing how that how today's conference went. But I'm Kyle Prawl, one of our troop here, and I'm joined today by fellow senior editor of PSU.com, Ernest Lynn. What's going on?
Hello.
Hey,
Yes.
dude.
We both watched that
Yeah, we did.
incredibly short, especially for Sony press conference.
It was, yeah. So I know that you were kind of torn in two places. You were watching the PlayStation meeting live stream as well as doing all of our social media efforts, making sure that all the news from the event got out there for our channels. I gotta say, as usual, your image and GIF game was on point. I
Oh
give you
man.
major props for that.
Yeah, it's difficult when they're just going through all that.
The
But
best
I mean, it was good.
the best I could muster was a screen cap of Mark Cerny at some point in his little stage bit, because man, that guy's voice. Am I
Oh,
right?
it's so good. It's just
Is
I
he
mean,
just
if
the
this
storyteller
whole
of our dreams, or
PlayStation,
what?
yeah, if this whole PlayStation thing doesn't work out for him, he can just be the voice, the go-to voice for books on tape.
He is a nursery rhyme wizard.
Yeah,
So something, and it's been so long too that I almost forgot just what a strange, unique presence he has when it
yeah,
comes to stage demos.
yeah. He has been kind of out of the limelight for a while, so I was actually surprised that they brought him back in. Because he's just been sort of out of the line, the public eye, the
Yeah,
gaming public's eye, and stuff
no,
like
for
that.
sure. And I think, there's a lot to dive into here, and there's a lot of analysis we can add to Mark Cerny's, even his appearance in the show, to me, says some things about Sony and the way they approached the show, in terms of how they thought the best way to promote the new system was, what kind of success they wanted to recapture. But first, top of the show, let's just run through the big takeaway announcements. Confirmation of the PlayStation 4 Slim that's been floating around for a while now,
Mhm.
leaked in every which way under the sun, 6 ways from Sunday, literally in
Oh,
people's hands.
just leaked in the most clear fashion. Just this is it. This is everything. We even had a teardown video last week. So,
I can
oh man,
honestly tell you that as the show opened with that, and we got through whatever the first 7-8 minutes talking about PS4 Slim, even for some announcements that have leaked or have been hinted at before, you get a little bit of a, I don't know how to, not like a heart rush or a little excitement, but you just kind of, something in you stirs a bit and you're like, oh, cool, it's a new thing, right? This was just total flatline for me. I mean, just,
right. It was
and I'm
like,
just
okay,
waiting. I'm like,
yes,
okay, great,
let's get
that's
it over.
fine.
Like, come on, let's keep going.
But this is the new PS4 to them. I don't think they're ever going to call it PS4 Slim officially. And to be honest, I don't know that they ever called the other Slim revisions PS4 Slim in like marketing materials. I think it just became a phased out situation where now this
Mhm.
is, and Mark Cerny said it, or maybe it was House, that this is just moving forward. This is what we mean when we say PS4. So looks the same. It is slimmer. I think the metric is 40% lighter or 40% thinner, as well as having all the same innards as our current PS4. So the tech that we already love is there in a smaller profile.
Right, right. The specs are all the same. I think some of the chipsets are probably a little bit smaller, more efficient, so it does draw significantly less energy compared to the regular PS4s. But
Hopefully stays
yeah,
cool despite the slimmer profile.
right. That's always a concern.
And it is, we do have a price. That was another big tidbit there, $299. So it's coming in at a retail MSRP. It's not significantly less than what you can get a PS4 now, because I feel like every other week there's some bundle, there's some way to get a PS4 for less than $400, whether it's $350 or even as low as $300 at times.
Right,
But
right.
regardless, $299 is now the baseline for PS4 moving forward.
Yeah, and they kind of were forced into that, even if they wanted to have a choice because of the Xbox One Slim, their 500 gigabyte model, I believe, is 299
Hmm.
as well. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I was kind of anticipating that would be the max they'd go. If they went 250, boy, that would throw Slims right off the shelf, into
Do
people's
you think they
homes.
should have? Because to be honest, I look at the Xbox One S specs, and this is something that people have been talking about on Twitter since the PlayStation meeting earlier today. The
Mhm.
Xbox One S just does more than the PS4 Slim.
It does. It does do the 4K streaming, Ultra HD 4K Blu-rays. It has a more attractive outer design. So
Hmm.
yeah,
More try, yeah, I'll definitely say that. It's it is kind of shocking to look at comparison pictures for both systems actually, and to see just how much smaller they're able to make them. But yeah, the 4K thing is really, it's going to be a sticking point and something we return to throughout this conversation,
right.
because immediately after getting all the deets about PS4 Slim, we moved on from that fairly quickly, and then the big daddy of the conference came, PS4 Pro. Not 4K, not PS4 Neo. PS4 Pro is the new PlayStation 4, their answer to, well, presumably their answer to Project Scorpio, although we're not really in the same ballpark when it comes to specs, but this is the 4K PS4 that we've been hearing so much about.
Right. This is the mid-generational upgrade that they're doing for the PlayStation 4. And all the specs seem to match up with what was leaked for, it's for PS4 Neo, which was the project name. And so
Yeah. Yeah, which it
it's
was double GPU memory from
right.
4 GB DDR5 to 8 GB, which
Mhm.
is substantial. I think if you look at across the board what they're doing with the new hardware, that's far and away the biggest thing. I mean, beyond that, they've upped the clock speed of the CPU and doubled the size of the hard drive, which frankly, even 1 TB kind of feels a little restrictive given how big games are lately. I mean, there's no question that people who buy a PS4 Pro are going to have to delete things at some point to just make room. I
Oh,
mean,
for sure.
1 TB isn't what it used to be, just like 500 GB definitely isn't what it used to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
the GPU doubling is the big thing here. And then we launched into I th- what can only be described as a gauntlet of tech information. I mean, to me, that's the vibe I got, and it really made the conference rather boring, to be quite frank.
Right. I've talked with people on Twitter and whatnot, and there were a lot of points in the conference where you kind of zone out because it's just talking about tech, s- tech, jargon and stuff that doesn't really feel concrete or something that the average person can grasp.
Mm,
And especially when they're showing off stuff with high dynamic range, the HDR stuff, you can't see that. Like the press there can see it because they're showing it on their top of the line Sony televisions. But
right.
here, when you're sitting at home on a YouTube or Twitch stream, it's just, oh yeah, that it looks good. And then
Oh, sure.
they do the transition. Now it's here in HDR, and you just kind of blink and,
Yeah, the
and
only place it
wonder.
worked. Yeah, right. The only place it worked for me was they had that still shot overlooking some like it was like a overlooking a city from the mountains, and you had a sunset peeking through these trees on the right, and it was a still image. So I think the image they flipped to must have been some kind of photoshopped image that kind of demonstrates HDR.
Mhm.
But then yeah, the video feed, I noticed that too with Days Gone, which I don't know if I don't know if that's the game that I would have chosen to demonstrate this kind of thing. I mean, that game, like a lot of people had concerns about Days Gone from E3,
Yeah.
including it not being a particularly visually impressive game. But yeah, and then he said, and then here it is with HDR, and I'm like, wait, did I miss it? Like nothing changed. So yeah, a poor demonstration. I think for enthusiasts, they do have the 4K videos you can go and download. Gorilla put up Horizon's footage in 4K on YouTube like immediately after the show, and I presume that they're doing more of that. But
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah. The Mass Effect stuff was shown uploaded to YouTube as well in
in
4K.
4K.
So
Oh,
you can
great! I'll
take a
have
look at
to
that as well.
nice. I'll
Yeah.
have to check that out later. It's a big improvement over my 720p stream. Yeah. Well, so here's all that's well and good, and I mean that's where Mark Cerny came out to sort of do his thing and talk through things that are otherwise just numbers on paper in a hopefully a compelling way. And I think what they were trying to do with him was recapture some of the magic from the PS4 reveal, which you attended in New York City.
Right. Yep.
But my feeling is that that wasn't enough to like it's not enough to just bring out a guy that people like, it's a fan favorite, and then get them
Hmm.
excited about the numbers. It's just my personal vibe is that the things that separate PS4 Pro from PS4 just aren't exciting factually.
No, it's such a pretty small incremental leap, and so it just didn't feel as fresh and new as when the PS4 was announced. And at points where they had Cerny talking about the benefits of that the PS4 Pro has for newer television owners with 4K and HDR, it almost felt at times a little too salesy. Like,
Mhm.
hey, Sony said, we want to really push more TV sales. You got to kind of mention this stuff, Cerny. And
Yeah, half the time I was wondering
he
if they
was
were going
saying
to
like, hey,
debut.
this is right, because they had them say stuff, like, hey, this looks blah 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 better than on conventional TVs, and blah 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 this better than conventional TVs, and you
Yeah,
know,
and that messaging was kind of mixed too because I liked, from a presentation standpoint, I liked how they laid out sort of the four reasons uh to get I keep wanting to say PS4 Neo, to get a PS4 Pro. They, it was the 4K upscaling, it was HDR, it was
mhm,
improve. I'm trying to think. Oh, games look better in 1080p as well. Like old games
right,
are going to be patched to have more textures, better grass, and whatever else. And then the
frame
fourth thing
rates, yeah,
was PSVR. So you would have double the pixel count. That's actually more. Here's kind of where I'm coming from. Like that's more exciting to me than the 4K resolution and the HDR lighting because when I think about my worries and concerns as a current PS4 owner, it's never been like resolution. It's never been games not looking good enough, you know? Like every new game that comes out, every new blockbuster title wows me in some way, whether it's Uncharted or Deus Ex,
hmm
Infamous back when that came out, Shadowfall going back to launch. Like the problem has never been that games don't look good enough or that I need a higher resolution. It's been compromises to like frame rates. I mean, games increasingly coming out and just running kind of poorly and kind of glitchy.
yeah. It's
It's been
been the performance stuff definitely. We don't we see stuff like, oh, how does this frame rate stay, how is it consistent,
mhm.
or games that aren't running at, that really could benefit from a higher frame rate, like 60 FPS, just running on 30. Um, very, like you said, very rarely do we see too much of a drop on some of the graphic fidelity stuff for cross-platform games. We've seen a
Yes.
lot of comparison videos, PC versus PS4, and the PS4 version still, of some of the more recent titles, still hold up very well. Stuff like
Yeah.
Overwatch and
Oh, great
Deus Ex and
example.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Deus Ex is another great example. Digital Foundry's analysis found that the PS4 version runs at basically the high slash very high spec of PC, and so
Yeah.
there's really only slight improvements you could even make to that. Yeah, so like because then my other concern as a current PS4 owner is about future things. Like I look at something like Final Fantasy 15. We've played it a few times already, including a fairly recent build at E3. We've seen evidence of it in trailers and gameplay videos as well. Is that
Hmm.
it just doesn't look very good in a lot of ways. Art direction great, aesthetics fine, but you get down to like Noctis's hair, right? And it's this jaggy, aliased mess.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean,
and
it's just the aliasing is so distracting because it kind of shimmers, especially when you're moving the camera around.
and it's
Um,
always dipping below 30 FPS. I mean,
ooh, all the time. Like
very
a
rarely did the
lot.
demos we play ever even hit 30, let alone stay at 30 consistently. And
Yeah.
E3 was the same way.
And that's really, really, really hurtful when you're dealing with this action RPG battle system.
Yes, for
You
sure.
want it to feel fluid, and when it doesn't look fluid, then
No, it
you
does,
know,
doesn't look good. It doesn't play fluid, not at all.
right?
Even leaving out the fact that SquareSoft going way back to then, and then Square Enix in recent years, like their games are known for being technological powerhouses and for pushing
Hmm.
the envelope in certain ways. Like it used to be you would get a Final Fantasy game and you would never have to worry that like the aliasing wasn't polished to where it needed to be, or that you'd have, slow down going into a menu. But now it feels like with 15, either, most likely because the PS4 is struggling to hold up to their ambitions, we're seeing these issues for the first time, like issues that used to be, oh, those are issues that other games deal with, but not Square games, not Final Fantasy games.
Right. These are the technical marvels, especially during the PlayStation 1 and 2 era, you know.
Mhm.
These are the things that you showcased, hey, this is what the PlayStation is capable of graphically.
Right.
Now it's struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something they used to pride themselves on, but here, I mean, like, I've just been worried about that as a thing. So that, that could have been a reason for me to come out and say, okay, a better PS4, great. That resolves my worries. And then VR would have been the last one. Like,
Hmm.
in my time using PlayStation VR, it's not like I've had any. I mean, my experiences have been pretty overwhelmingly positive, but there, you do have cases where you're playing the game, and even though it's dialed in where it should be, the headset is physically
Hmm.
in sync with your eyes, like games are still a little blurry, the pixel count or the resolution rather
Right,
feels a
especially,
bit
you know,
down.
some of the stuff on your sides and peripherals
Yeah, that's where it gets
feel
really
like
bad.
really, yeah, that's where it gets really bad. So
So as a PS4 owner, like those things are what concern me most. The
mhm.
low frame rate and glitchiness of current games, a few key titles on the horizon that look like they're being held back by PS4, and then just wanting to have the best VR experience possible. And they did mention VR there. I mean, they did, like, at least that point they did finally get to, but to me personally as a PlayStation guy, the first two things, the frame rate and then just making sure games run at all,
Mhm.
is way more important to me than playing with a 4K display. Even though I do own a 4K TV, like that's not even an issue with me. Games look fantastic in 1080p,
Mhm.
regardless of whether it's on this TV or a different TV. Like that was never an issue for me. Is that I need games to look better or need a few better textures here and there.
Yeah, and I mean, I would gladly have a better looking and better running 1080p mode for the PlayStation 4 Pro than just one that's runs about the same stuttery mess that the non Pro runs, you know, but in 4K. You know,
Right.
resolution is great and all, but when you're really in the game, you sort of miss out on that.
Yeah, it's not like
Yeah,
you're constantly watching for it. I mean, give me
right.
1080p and 60 FPS
Hmm.
any day of the week over a upscaled 4K, and not even a native
Right,
4K,
it's not even native. It's just upscaled,
and
which is, you know, if we think
30
about it, it's
hertz.
probably going to be stuff like the HUD, menus, and reticles and
Yeah.
whatnot.
I mean,
So,
I can get over a lot. I just picked up Trails of Cold Steel 2 on PS3, and that
mhm.
game looks like ass compared to modern titles, you know?
Right.
Uh, but I get it. It's new hardware, but still, the 1080p, 60 FPS. I feel like I mean, and granted, PS4 Pro might totally do those things, but as of right now, I can't tell you for sure that it will. I mean, it seems like it's on a totally developer by developer basis, totally case by case.
Right. It sounds like they're giving them just a lot of freedom on how much they want to utilize for the power that the PS4 Pro offers, you know,
Right.
that bare minimum they could just get it running just basically the same as on the regular PS4 and that would
Which
be
would be
good
a
enough,
huge
you
bummer.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, which would be crazy. I mean, they need to like. There's a huge, the value proposition here is really hard to buy in because we did get the price. It's going to come out at $399 on November 10th this year, so it's coming soon. I think most people kind of either assumed or hoped that it would come out before 2017, and
Right, for the holiday season.
it's not like we expected. Excuse me. It's not like we expected a price lower than that, but that's definitely a good. It's a sweet spot for what it is. I think no reasonable person would expect them to have come in lower.
Mhm. Right, with brand new upgraded hardware, so
And
that
yet
was
at the
what
same
it.
time, like they haven't sold me on it because the thing about it is when they talk about, there's I think Mark's his exact words were, we have over half a dozen first party developers supporting HDR and PS4 Pro features, and quite a few third party partners.
Hmm.
And he said, we're asking our partners to consider how they can use PS4 Pro to improve their titles. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. So you're saying at max there's maybe like 12 games out there in entirety that are going to really take advantage of this and see a visual boost? Because what worries me, and I, the optimist that I am, the eternal optimist, is I
Hmm.
went in thinking, we've been told for a while that PS4 is more like a computer than any other Sony console there has been.
Right.
So my thought was that with PS4 Pro, just by virtue of having different innards, the same games you would put in would just run better like a PC, like they're being rendered in real time. So you have double the GPU,
Yeah.
suddenly your frame rate is not even an issue anymore. And that could very well be the case, but we have no idea. It's not like they said anything about that, if that is true.
Right.
Um,
I mean, right now it sounds like you need some sort of patch in order to see improvements on how
right.
on older games, older PS4 games running on the system, and that's kind of disappointing because
A huge bump.
one of the fun things about when you upgrade your PC or get a new PC is going back to your games library
Yes,
and trying out
yes,
games and turning up the settings high
yes.
and seeing how far you can push the frame rates and the
Oh,
visual
absolutely.
fidelity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's always been a real thrill of mine, even going back to simple things I tried to play way back in the day, like Doom 3 and stuff that just brought my
Right.
ancient computers to their knees and then,
Yeah.
blowing it out of the water. But yeah, I mean, I think like just it boggles the mind because the frame rate argument is brought up so much in modern gaming, even among console fanboys on either side of the fence, in
Hmm.
places like Reddit and the PSU forums and on Twitter. People are all about that analysis, like that digital foundry breakdown. What platform does it run better on? What platform has the higher resolution? And to think that they missed this golden goose opportunity to come out and say, you know, all your favorite games now run in 60 frames per second on PS4 Pro. And granted, that's assuming that it's true. As we just talked about, that may not be the case at all, and you might need a patch by patch basis to even enable that.
Hmm.
But if that's the case, if it is patch by patch, huge missed opportunity with the console. I mean, I can't imagine they couldn't have found some way to just make games run better just by virtue of being in a better console.
Right. And I mean,
Uh,
if you're a third party developer, what incentive do you have to go back to a game that's a couple years old and
I would
patch
say
it?
virtually none. Like
Right.
you've
I
already
mean,
got
that's why I
people's
was
money.
super surprised when they showed off, hey, this is Shadow of Mordor with a patch.
Oh,
And I just
right?
thought that game, I think
That
you,
game is like a year and a half old,
yeah,
maybe more, 18
I
months
think
more.
it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty old. And, I think you can get it used probably around like $15-$20,
Yeah, seriously. It
and
was not. I
most
mean,
people are going to buy it used now rather than a new copy. So I was really surprised that
or
the
Infamous
WB,
First Light. I mean, that's got to
yeah,
be a couple years old. Yeah, it's like first of all, weird title. I'm not sure what's driving WB to go back and issue a patch for that game. But yeah, the highly selective nature of the games they did show does speak to it being a patch by patch basis, which is a
hmm,
huge bummer because developers already have our money for games that came out a year or more ago. And it's not like they're villains in this situation. If fans ask, why don't you patch your games that it runs better, they can just say, well, we're working on the next thing, you know? And it's if we really can't fault them for that. We really can't say, "Oh, damn it,
right,
Capcom, you should. Why don't you care more about us? The game's already out there." I as a consumer, I don't feel like I can hold any blame against a company that decides not to issue a quote unquote forward compatible patch for a previous game, and that sucks. It sucks that we have to. It's essentially a dice roll. I mean, somebody who, unless they come out with a massive list of back patches and some really great breakdowns, side by side screenshots of what Infamous Second Son looked like before and what it looks like now. What are some other games that might take advantage of what Bloodborne looked like before and
Bloodborne,
what it looks
yeah,
like now? God, Bloodborne would hugely benefit from this with its frame rate and frame pacing issues. But unless they come out with this laundry list of game by game improvements, like to me, that's the value proposition. And right now, there's nowhere near enough
hmm,
improvement to the games I've been playing to make this worthwhile.
right. I mean, you got to think also just how many of these people care to go back and replay those games when there's all these newer titles that would be coming up.
Right,
So
for sure.
yeah, it just it just didn't feel exciting to to hear all about that. And back to the image improvements, I just feel right now, especially the general public, doesn't grasp how great the benefits of stuff like 4K resolution and HDR can be. You
Right.
know, I don't think a lot of people understand or have seen that, and so when they hear that, they just sort of zone out, and it's just tech
Yeah.
mumbo jumbo to
I
them.
don't own a TV yet, so why do I need to pay attention to what you're telling me about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would have been nicer if they focus a little bit more on the benefits that you'll see with the 1080p resolution
Hmm.
modes for games.
And it's not even that, 4K is far from ubiquitous, not even close to being that. But those TVs are becoming more affordable, I think, for most people who are currently or will soon be in the market to buy a TV. They'll probably start looking in like the budget 4K range and perhaps go up from there if the budget allows.
Hmm.
But I'm one of those people. I just recently bought what I would call a budget 4K TV, and it doesn't support HDR. So now I'm sitting here going, well, even if I, even if my TV does, you know, I'm a 4K owner, but I can't even take advantage of that particular feature.
Hmm.
And that boggles the mind because then to me it's like, I just spent money on this TV, not to me, not an insubstantial amount of money. And now it's like, well, if I really wanted to get the best juice out of PS4 Pro and milk it for what very little it seems to be worth, I would
Hmm.
need to spend even more on a better TV than the one I've been enjoying. And
Right,
that's so
and
hard to
with
swallow.
HDR, from my understanding, the games need to have support for that, because when they were announcing and talking about the Xbox One S, and that has support for HDR. Right now, the only games scheduled to support HDR are two of the first party titles, the upcoming Forza and then Gears of War 4. And so, if you're a third party developer, you don't have a whole lot of incentive to support HDR when right now there aren't that many people with a television set that has that feature.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So it somewhat counteracts what you said, but I think it
Okay.
moves to another point. Is that Mark did mention during the show that every PlayStation 4 owner will be able to benefit from HDR with a patch coming out next week. He
Right.
says, "Quote: With proper display, all 40 million PlayStation 4 owners can join the HDR revolution." Obviously, with the proper display, again, this means nothing if you or I don't own an HDR TV,
Right.
but
And I mean, from what I've heard, at least from the Xbox One side of things, the games need to have support for HDR. Like they
really.
need they need to, yeah.
Okay, so they're just enabling it on a hardware level, and now
Right.
it's
It's
oh
there.
geez,
Right.
that's that's so even beyond all that, which is just you know confusing messaging. I mean, like yeah, even us having to talk about it is not a good sign for Sony. Us trying to figure out what they actually mean, but it's
Right.
beyond that. It's also pulling the rug out from under what could have been one of PS4 Pro's flagship features. I mean, HDR is not a for granted thing. I mean, for the visual like aficionados, the people who really care that they talked about at the beginning of the show, they know HDR. They know what presumably they know what difference it can make in picture quality. And
Mhm.
yet so that could have been an attractive thing, an attractive bullet point is what I mean. It could have been something that would have contributed to these pillars of PS4 Pro that make it worthwhile, but instead any PS4 owner can benefit from it, assuming that the games receive their patches.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just I just feel like even as I look at articles online about these different announcements, like I'm on Ars Technica looking at this HDR story right now.
Mhm.
Like nowhere in here does it mention the game patch thing also being a requirement, which is whatever. I totally think that that's the case, and you're right about that.
Yeah.
But it's like, what the heck's going to happen when people get that firmware update? These 40 million PS4 owners, and at best, a person casually paying attention to these announcements is going to think, "Great, I'm getting HDR next week," and then it arrives for them, but then none of these games support it, and now you've got to go
Right.
online, you've got to go on PlayStation blog to try to figure it out, like what
Yeah. I
games do
mean,
and don't. It's so
I
confusing.
just Googled which Xbox One games have HDR, and it's literally four. And it's Forza Horizon 3, Gears of War 4, NBA 2K17, and Scalebound.
Mm. One of
according
which
to
isn't even
IGN.
out yet.
Right, and so yeah, it sounds like the games need to specifically support that feature.
Which basically means it's not a value proposition at all. It's not even something that, it's got a huge unmentioned
It's
caveat.
kind of a hey, there's potential, but it's not going to be with everything necessarily.
Yeah, and
You
that
know.
potential, that proof is nowhere to be found right now. I mean, there's just simply Horizon Zero Dawn looks incredible, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you how Uncharted looks on a PS4 Pro because I haven't seen their 4K export of it, and as we've talked about, YouTube couldn't capture what the people in attendance were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just all these unanswered questions, and clearly there are games that look great, Horizon being chief among them, but
Yeah.
I'm concerned, very, very concerned, that this is going to go the way of a few first party Sony titles taking
Mm-hmm.
advantage of it and looking phenomenal, and then you just the scarce third party team here and there, like your Call of Duty guys, your Bungie with Destiny 2,
Right. EA
that
stuff,
will,
but that's about
yeah,
it.
they'll
Yeah.
have something to show because those announcements come from like backroom handshakes, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's nothing that's, at least not yet, it's nothing that's going to benefit the gamer. And I think if someone goes out and buys a PS4 Pro, it is you're hedging your bet on developers filing into line behind Sony with a vague vision of an iterative console, and I don't think that's going to happen. They've had much better ideas that were
Mm-hmm.
much
Right.
clearer telegraphed and had less people stand in line behind them, like stereoscopic 3D for one.
Exactly. Yeah. The benefits just aren't concrete enough, and they don't feel guaranteed. You know, there's a bit of sense of doubt. You know how much developers are going to improve the games, that run on PS4 Pro. They didn't really talk about VR. I'm sure VR will run a little bit better with PS4 Pro, but they just didn't say anything specific. So you just kind of have to take a leap of faith with going
Yeah,
on in the PS4 Pro.
I mean, I think it's a big ask what they're doing in this holiday season because you've got no less than three brand new PlayStation devices coming out between now and Christmas. The
Right.
net, not that anybody would buy all three of those. I mean, there's really no reason why someone would buy a Slim and a Pro. That's just kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you put all that together in one way or another, Sony is asking for. I'm trying to recall the VR bundle if you have the controllers. I mean, Sony's basically asking
Well, yeah,
for
it's so
like
the
$1,100, $1,200
right.
in
So it's
various
400
forms.
for the base headset, but if you don't have the camera and the move controllers, you gotta do
Mhm.
500. So basically, it's 500. So you have 500 there. Then you have the console, the PS4 Pro console. That's 400. So you're looking at $900 right there.
$900 just for that. That's
And that's
and
without
that's
like anything like, hey, if you want to really take advantage of the visual fidelity or benefits of PS4 Pro, getting a 4K HDR TV.
right, which is no laughing matter. As
No.
funny as you and I think it is,
Yeah.
it's not in our budget. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Right. So what else did we get from the show? We got some little tidbits here and there at the end of the show. Like we got assets from Sony afterwards, showing the PS4 Pro from every angle.
Yep.
I describe it as a pitch black ice cream sandwich. I don't know how you feel
Right.
about it.
Yeah, I think it's not a particularly attractive console. It does have that sandwich look, and at least the top of it has sports the same boring look that the Slim does, where it's just squarish with matte black plastic and then a glossy PlayStation logo in the center. And it just looks it looks really boring and lazy.
Yeah, lazy. I would agree with, or at the very least uninspired, because
Hmm.
from all this different. I mean, the design is boring simplicity itself, like just a single PlayStation logo on that matte finish. But then beyond that, you literally just take the profile of the current PS4 and add another layer on top of it, like another divot and then a third layer. Like we're just building on the same base. I mean, which I don't know. I guess maybe there's something to be said for having it be visually consistent with its generation, but I think what made the PS4 revision or PS3 revisions cool was that you saw Sony take things into consideration, think about how the form factor maybe wasn't great from the get-go. So
Hmm.
you had the matte slim, and then you had the final slim revision, I feel like was just made to keep manufacturing costs as low as possible.
Right.
But
That super slim felt pretty cheap,
yes, it did.
Yeah.
Very so. Not terribly impressed. I do like the vertical stand of the PS4 Pro, which you can kind of make out in those asset shots. Again, we're on psu.com. We've got all the screenshots there on the front page, and I like it because I mean, when I think about the PS4, what do we even call it now? The vanilla PS4's vertical stand?
I guess like standard or regular.
Yeah,
You can
the
call it the
reg
fat, I guess.
the fat PS4, sure.
Yeah.
It's vertical stand. It just kind of continues the form factor of the console that sits on it. But with this stand, it almost reminds me of a new TV. Like it's got that kind of
Mm,
sort of extending out from a center point to be this very flat sort of pyramid shape, this triangle shape. I think it's stylish. I think that's the one part of this particular design that is new and is kind of interesting,
hmm.
at least from the perspective of something we haven't seen before.
Right.
Gosh, I'm not in love with anything else though. As I scroll through these, I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for people who didn't watch the conference or followed any of the leaks, rumors, and stuff, is that all the games are just it's all PS4 games. There aren't going to be exclusive games
Hmm.
for the PS4 Pro.
Right,
So
right.
everything's going to run. It's the same family. They did a pretty good job of emphasizing that. I
Huge
think
take,
over.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like if there's a single thing that somebody should take away from the show that they didn't you know that wasn't clear up until this point, it's that if you currently own a PS4, you are totally fine. Sit on that PS4. You have absolutely in my opinion, you don't have a strong need to go out and buy a PS4 Pro.
Right.
If you have the 4K HDR TV for it already, more power to you, because it's $400, but it's something that you could get trade-in value for. You could find ways to recoup a bit of that cost. But
Yeah.
if you're missing any part of this, of what's necessary to max out the already limited potential of the device, then you just shouldn't even bother.
Right. Right. I mean, I look at someone like my younger brother, who's just a kid in college. I think the regular PS4 is just going to be just fine for him, and
Oh,
other
absolutely.
other people like that. Just hey, this plays all the games. It's still going to be all the new games moving forward are still going to be required to run on the regular PS4, and so when you already have one and you don't have a ton of disposable income, it's just fine to hold on to that regular PS4. It's something that you can say compare it to like the Apple and their iPhones. You always have the numbered and then the numbered S model. So
Well,
when
if
you look
anything,
at it that way, it's like
yeah,
comparing the 6 versus 6S. It's not a necessary upgrade. If you want the latest and greatest, sure. But
yeah.
I
Well, if
think you're
anything, I think the iPhone argument, there's even possibly, like, you're right, those are incremental upgrades, but I feel like there's even more of a draw there because the benefits are pretty tangible. I mean,
they are more
the
tangible.
you've got
Stuff
the
like the
improved,
camera stuff,
exactly.
force touch and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
So
every app across the board loads faster, runs faster, the colors are prettier across the board.
mhm.
And we just there are still some unknowns with PS4 Pro. Like, it could be a thing where previous games in 1080p, like they always are, run smoother by default. We have our doubts, but that could be the case. And the patches could be more for enabling HDR or enabling
Visual
better
improvements.
textures on a Pro. Yeah,
Yeah.
like better grass and whatnot. So there could be across the board improvements. But it's 50-50 whether that's the case right now. And either way, the messaging around it is very muddled. I think
Hmm.
the even if that is the case, you get better performance across those games. I don't think it's just not changing the experience enough to even really be quite as big a leap as like an iPhone 6 to a 6S. Like, this feels like an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 6 with just the RAM improvements,
Right.
or iPhone 6 to iPhone 6.5, where some games have better color, but not all games, and the internet still looks the same, and your app icons still look the same. You know, so trying to draw these weird parallels. The basic point is that it's Sony's attempt at the incremental hardware upgrade just feels really shallow to me, and there's not a lot there.
Right. There isn't a lot. And when you think about from the developer perspective, they're asking them to have their game run on two consoles now. And granted, yeah, one of them is more powerful, but that's still something that you have to take time and
Yeah, I
energy
don't think it's a
into,
small
is
thing.
ensuring the quality, on the PS4 Pro still at least matches what is on the regular. So if you're a developer, you got to think like, if Sony's giving me a lot of leeway on how much of an improvement I can have on for PS4 Pro, why would there isn't a lot of incentive or appeal to maybe necessarily so having a really good improvements on the PS4 Pro when you've just still got the huge install base that is the regular PS4s.
Yeah, looks like why wouldn't you just optimize for the regular PS4? I mean, you still have to
Mm-hmm.
QA the Pro version just to make sure it
Exactly.
doesn't break, you know? But
Yep.
that's really all you have to do unless you have the the resources and manpower to and that just sounds silly as I say it because what developer is done with their game on the day it releases, you know? Like what game doesn't have a day one patch these days?
Right.
So it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you just optimize for the PS4 that is a known quantity and of which there are 40 million of already in consumers' hands, so
Mm-hmm.
that you don't make the risk of shooting for the moon and then falling among the stars of PS4 Pro, but then down here on Earth, your ambitions overran what the PS4 can do. So now it runs even shittier on PS4 than it otherwise would have because tried to do some pro things. And it's like weird, if maybe you can make a
And you want to please the majority, which is the standard PS4 owner now.
yeah, and I'm trying to think like what
Yeah.
because they alluded to a few they alluded to like being able to turn on and off these features a little bit something about I think it was Cerny somewhere in there he said something about Days Gone or another game where it's like developers can enable these extra features on existing games, which sounds to me like there will literally be, menu items in settings that switch you between PS4 and PS4 Pro like
Mm-hmm.
display modes. And if that's the case, that's a whole nother ball game because I really can't see many teams spending time to implement these two separate versions. And especially not
Right.
because if you go too hard on it and if you make the pro version look that much better, you're gonna have salty feelings among the people, the many, many, many people that are playing your game on the regular PS4.
Mm-hmm. It's a tricky scenario and something that we haven't really ever seen when it comes to console games. So I mean, it's
Yeah,
going to be really interesting to see what the widespread developer reaction is and what actions they take now that this is just the environment that their games are going to have to be in.
my concern is that, and we've seen this before with other attempts at breaking from the mold from Sony. It was stereoscopic 3D, PlayStation Eye, and the Eye
Mm-hmm.
toy before that, even Move to some extent. It seems like they really get on the horse with this messaging early on, and they really kind of pound on developers to follow suit and make some cool stuff. But then the talk about it and the passion for it, even on Sony's end, dies after like a year and a half. And then at that point, it's like, well, it was already a tough ask for our developers. It's just, I think it's going to get easier and easier over time for developers to just not care and like not
Exactly,
try
and
it.
that's kind of what I feel like will happen, especially that games haven't gotten any easier or cheaper to make now. That they just are going to look at it and say, well, let's just do the bare minimum we have to do, which is getting the game running at the quality of the
Yeah.
regular PS4 onto the PS4 Pro, and
Yeah.
just ship
Sony,
it.
yeah,
Just ship
for
it and
sure.
get it done with.
And the more of them that do that, the easier it is for every consecutive developer to follow suit because Sony has the uphill battle here.
Mm-hmm.
And I can picture the Reddit AMAs and the other contexts in which fans would ask, "Hey, what's planned for the PS4 Pro version?" or "Hey, what new features can we expect?" And all it takes is a few developers to say, we're really doing everything we can to give a great experience for everyone. And what's nice for them is that that's the diplomatic answer. Like that's totally the the morally right answer in the eyes of the gamers for them to say we want the best for everyone and we're
Right, and it
laser focused on
sort
this
of
base experience.
sides with the everyman.
Exactly, sides with the everyman, and then the moment that one developer says that, another one can go, well, that's what we're all about, right? We're all about the best experience possible for everyone, and it's a huge challenge for us to make a game this ambitious. Just using all those buzzwords
Hmm.
to gloss over the fact that we have no PS4 Pro support planned, and it'll be probably relegated to first party titles. Now, here's the flip side of that. For the passionate PlayStation fan with the money to spare, the thing is, PS4 Pro for the moment isn't really hurting me by existing. Like I think my
No.
one of my concerns going into the announcement was that it was going to be so good that I wouldn't be able to resist it, right? Because the games would just look so much better and like across the board frame rates would be better and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
because that's not the case, I feel totally fine. Like I have no urgency to get this and I'm totally secure in the purchase I currently have.
Right. I've just seen so much on Twitter. People, their response is, I don't feel that excited or that I need to get this. It's not a must-have, and that's also the case talking with some of our other staff where they've said, I'll get it eventually, but maybe sometime next year.
Yeah, right. Maybe,
Not this year.
yeah, for
So,
sure. Once that price falls, perhaps, which it
mhm,
inevitably will to compete with Scorpio, I think,
right.
come next fall or next holiday season, or
And then,
whenever.
for the hardcore fans who don't have a ton of disposable income, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, do I get the? You're basically looking at it and saying, do I get the VR headset or do I get the PS4 Pro?
Yeah, that's how I feel. And the choice
And
is
VR
not even a
feels
choice.
the VR feels more exciting.
Yes,
So I think a lot of people
absolutely.
are going to choose that over getting the PS4 Pro.
Yeah, do I want FF15 to render chocobo feathers with a little less jaggies, or do I want to exist in virtual reality?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the choice is clear. I do, from the perspective that it doesn't really hurt anybody, like we keep saying, we're fine where we are, we don't need to purchase another PS4. I'm sure that Sony wanted that to be one of the messages that people have with them as they leave the show. It's not a bad thing for current owners to feel like they're getting left behind. That kind of builds goodwill, but it also makes for just sort of a boring coming out party. And we've never had something like this before. We've never had an incremental console try to come out and just not shake up the pond, not drop a catapult, just sort of muddy the waters a little bit with some new tech,
Mhm.
but not try to make so much of a splash that all of us current PS4 owners are getting wet. But the result just feels a little deflating. I think, it maybe speaks to the hype boy in me a little bit. But when we build up to shows like this, I kind of want to be impressed, even though I'm
Right. I
sitting
want
here
to be
saying,
wowed. I want to have surprises.
hmm
And I mean, to Sony's credits, there were things leading up to it that were out of their control.
yes,
This stuff like the leaks, definitely deflated some of the announcements. But even if you look at it separate from that, it just wasn't a very exciting press conference. And
hmm
especially when you compare it to this past E3s, where man, the focus was on games, and ultimately that's what you care about. It's just seeing those games in action, seeing new games or new footage of games. And we only got a little bit of that here. And the rest was a lot of technical talk and stuff to, just convey basic information, which, it needs to be done. And that's probably why they didn't want to talk about, um, the PS4 Pro and whatnot until now and just get it out of the way with a really short press conference. That way, Tokyo Game Show and then PlayStation Experience later this year, they can just get back to focusing on games
yeah, I
and
guess I
building
don't
up
know.
excitement.
I
I
don't know
don't
if there
know.
was an easy out for them because Andrew House, in speaking to, I feel like it was the Wall Street Journal shortly before E3, like he did
Mm-hmm.
confirm that the Neo exists.
Right.
And that feels, now in hindsight, that feels like a reaction to knowing that Microsoft was probably going to unveil this kind of Scorpio concept. And so we had to just say something so that the public didn't immediately write us off and think, oh, well, Sony's not doing anything. Because
Right, they're
here's the
falling
problem.
behind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because my issue is that if House hadn't said that, and like let's assume that there have been zero leaks, House never said that. It's just
Hmm.
Microsoft has Project Scorpio and Sony has PS4, and that's it. That's all we know about. If they had come out with this PlayStation meeting, same exact presentation, all the same details, that still would have looked really bad for them, I think, because the PS4 Pro's specs and features we're speculating a little bit, of course, but from leaked specs, we know that it's less powerful than Scorpio will be. So
Right. I
so
mean,
it's like
it's.
they don't look good either way. It's like you either have to be competitive in the space
Mhm.
or come out with something that's really appealing, like holy crap, a $300 PS4 Pro, or just
Mhm.
differentiate yourself because clearly their notion of PS4 Pro was never going to look good next in the current marketplace.
Yeah, there's after coming out of this conference, it just feels, sadly that the Scorpio has a good opportunity to really shine and, you know, be this huge, powerful console in comparison. It's not going to take much, honestly, even if they don't hit the 10 teraflops, graphics processing that they're trying to aim for.
Hmm.
The PS4 Pro is only at like 4 point something. And so even if they're at 6, they could say, oh, we are 33% more powerful than the PS4 Pro,
Right.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
and instead, what we're probably going to get. I mean, you have to assume native 4K. I mean, if we believe that the Project Scorpio is spec'd out a bit
mhm.
higher, I think they have to. There's got to be maybe it's not native 4K, but maybe it is just like a flat 60 FPS on every single title, or maybe it's native 1440p or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Something that's in between, like not quite 4K, but gets kind of there. It's kind of reminds me of when last generation we saw games that weren't quite 720p.
Hmm.
It'd be like 540 or 640p, um, but they would try and like count it. It's like, yeah, it's kind of HD.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we'll see that with that and be like, yeah, it's basically 4K. Well, if you round up, it's 4K.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's 4K in somebody's mind.
yeah.
I mean, so not a whole lot of positive to take from the show in general. The one thing we haven't touched on yet is the games. We did see some game footage of a few titles, including, well, I mean, really, Mass Effect Andromeda is the standout here. We saw the first ever uh,
Gameplay,
recorded
right?
gameplay of,
Yeah.
of the title. Yeah. Um, that was exciting in and of itself to even have Mass Effect appear. That was a total surprise to me.
Hmm.
It was kind of underwhelming.
I was gonna
um,
say the specific excerpt that they showed wasn't that exciting. Just kind of navigating these space caves and then
yeah,
looking at a space map, and then some of the just animation and visual stuff wasn't exactly blow your mind, wowing. I think the
yeah,
one
lip syncing issues, and I noticed
right,
some
Horizon Zero Dawn looked really good.
yes.
Um, I think the Spider Man I'm really excited for.
I am.
And
I wish we would have gotten more than just like a slow zoom around,
mhm.
Spider-Man's body because again, like you can't tell much from that. I mean, I really think that's probably the game that I'm most hyped for of all the ones that showed up there. The Mass Effect stuff. I mean, it feels like they took the most boring mission from the game and used that. Like, used literally like
Right. And
jetpacking from
maybe
platform to platform, and it
maybe that
looks like
was
a lot harder.
intentional because it maybe they thought, oh, this will be a safe choice. Like this won't have problems running.
Yeah. This
you
this
know?
won't break during
Yeah,
the.
this won't break or anything. So
Yeah, maybe, but God, it's like
I don't know. What
don't.
was some of the other games they showed?
We saw Deus Ex, but I mean that's
We
already
saw
out.
Deus Ex.
A little
We saw Rise of the
exclusive.
Tomb Raider.
That's true. That's
Which
true.
looked good, and then we saw Ubisoft's For Honor. I think
And
was
Watch
another
Dogs
one they
2.
showed, and then Watch Dogs 2 as well. But those, I mean, they looked not. They didn't look that. much better,
Yeah,
in my
it's like,
opinion.
I'm sorry, but there was just not like you can't.
I can't. You know, I'm being honest here. I just like, yeah, yeah. It
The thing is, they
looks
didn't show
kind of like
off
how it
like,
did.
yeah, I mean, you can't portray the difference in resolutions over a stream, like whatever, we get that. But honestly, it's kind of difficult to prove the difference in resolutions anyway, even on native video feed, unless you're under certain things. Like you, in an ideal environment, you would want a large enough TV, and you'd want to be sitting close enough to really appreciate those differences. And even then, they're somewhat subtle. I
Right.
think that color and crispness means so much more than pixel count generally. And even something like HDR, I think, makes a bigger visual difference.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's such a tough ask, and like that's part of what made it so whelming is that I felt like we were just watching a sizzle reel of titles we've already seen. And unless you're showing me like a sweeping shot of Watch Dogs 2 over the city, immediately followed by the same shot on PS4 Pro with like more buildings or more pedestrian traffic, or
Exactly.
oh my gosh, those textures are noticeably better. I think that's what I was hoping to see in PS4 Pro, but instead it's just an upscaled 4K. And I mean, even when I was talking about the subtle difference between 1080p and native 4K, I meant native. I didn't upscale this. Not even as striking as native. So
Hmm.
it's gonna be a it's gonna be a tough sell, and it's tough to demonstrate to people. I mean, I feel like Sony's gonna have to give download links to the MP4 videos so that people can
Right.
watch and compare for
High bit
themselves.
rate stuff just to
Yeah,
be able
yeah.
to have people compare them.
Mhm.
Yeah, right now it's looking like a tough sell. You know, it's standard retail is going to be $100 more. So I mean, for people our age and older, you know, it's not out of realm if they don't have a PS4. But for people who already own one, they're upgrading, or people on a budget, you know, they can look at the Slim, or you know, pre-owned. Uh, I guess PS4 Fats, the original model.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine we'll see the same thing that happened with the original Xbox One models, where retailers, especially online ones, are just going to be trying to clear stock on the regular PS4
Yeah,
models,
so we'll
and
see
so
that
we'll
come
see
through.
those at, you know, sub 300 prices, stuff like, you know, probably around like the 250 to 260 range.
And hey, if you've been waiting to dive in on it, like that's by all
Ooh,
means go for it, because
yeah,
that's going to be an attractive offer. And even the price reduction on the existing system, the known quantity we have is to me more attractive than the dice roll on whether developers are really even going to support the PS4 Pro.
yeah. Right now, it's kind of a wait and see scenario, and see what what exact differences we're going to see in, you know, the various games and VR. What are the benefits? Because right now
Hmm.
it just feels like, hey, this could happen, but we're not guaranteeing that all your games will be that much better. So
And if nothing else, now is the time to come out with some clear messaging,
hmm
because we have for being immediately after a conference of a property that's so hard to sell to begin with. We have way too many questions. It just spell things out, tell us exactly what we're getting with PS4 Pro, exactly how our existing games will or won't be better. Clearly, if they don't say something that says as much as what they do say,
yeah,
and just hopefully there's something there behind the curtain that we don't know yet. Because right now, even as the PlayStation enthusiast as I am well outside that fence.
yeah. I haven't pre-ordered
No,
for
no.
this console, and I'm seeing pre-orders still available at a bunch of retailers for the PS4 Pro. So it's no original PS4 scenario.
Clearly not. Clearly not. Clearly not.
Not even close.
Mm.
So
Well, I mean, I don't feel like we're pretty far off the mark with our opinions here. I mean, it's been
mhm.
pretty reflective of what I've seen on the social medias, but we are very, very curious about what you, our listeners, think about PS4 Pro, as well as PS4 Slim. But really, just what was your big takeaway from PlayStation meeting? What's your take on the direction Sony is going? This incremental upgrade, has it caught your eye? Is it something you'll ever bother with, or are you fine where you're at? Let us know. We want to hear from you. Ernest, that was a
Yes.
pretty good conversation. It was happy to digest that with you a little bit.
Yeah, it was just good to reflect on today's happenings, and see where it goes. I think it is, like I said, a very much wait and see, and we'll be listening and taking a look at what Sony has to offer more on the PS4 Pro.
Yeah, let's hope for clear messaging in the days ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right, let's sign off on this thing. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, we really appreciate it. Tuning in for our little PlayStation show here. This has been PlayStation Fix episode 40, and as we continue to grow the show, we continue to bring you better topics, better conversation on the world of PlayStation. We're always up for feedback, so hit us up in the comments of psu.com where you see the article. If you view us on SoundCloud, that's great. Drop a comment there. If you listen to us on iTunes, we'd love it if you leave a review. It's always very much appreciated. In the meantime, though, while you wait for the next episode, continue to keep it peeled to psu.com, where we bring you PS4 news, reviews, opinions, as well as our little friend, the PlayStation Vita. He's always there at the top of our minds. We're on Twitter. We're at psu.com, all spelled out, 9 letters there, and other social media channels of all your favorites. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been PlayStation Fix, episode 40. Until next time, I'm Kyle. That's my buddy Ernest.
Yep.
Take care.